Welcome to another edition of Jesus for Mormons. I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon church, and this is what I did after leaving.
And I'm Di Beals, and I'm your friend. I'm a pastor at Venture Church in Washington State, and I'm along for your journey.
All right. Di, I am really excited about today's episode. I would encourage the listeners to stick through to the end because there is some really good content at the very end that kind of gets set up throughout the whole episode.
There's good content all the way through, Kai.
Okay. Well, thank you. You're very kind. All right. The title of today's episode is Mormon Assets. And before I get into the Mormon assets, I first want to discuss this show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. We did an episode, Mormons Gone Wild. And that episode was really good. But during it, Di, I said, I'm going to watch this show. I'm going to watch Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Did you?
I tried.
You should have listened to me.
I should have listened to you. I am not acclimated to reality TV. Like, I did not realize just how mean and nasty and I'm sitting there watching it with my wife, and we're trying to make it through an episode, and we're going in, and I'll tell you, it's not my cup of tea. I'm not trying to bag on people that it is, but not for me. There was one silver lining though.
Okay.
There's one negative and there's one positive.
There's only one negative?
Well, no, aside from the show. I had to pay $8 to watch it. Which I'm like, come on, you guys. I'd pay $8. But after it was over, we turn off the TV and I'm laying there in bed, and I look over at my wife and I say, I got one of the good ones. Well, in light of that show, it's not hard to see that you got one of the good ones. But my wife is great. That's terrible. I shouldn't be throwing rocks at these gals and husbands. Anyways, that show is not my cup of tea. But if you are enjoying this show, I never promote. I should do better job. Please like it. Please share it, subscribe to it, write us a 5-star review. If it's a 1-star review, maybe skip the review. But if it's a 5-star, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into this. The title is Mormon Assets. The assets of the Mormon Church are $265 billion with a B.
Whoa.
Billion dollars. What are your thoughts of that as a fellow church person?
Why are they sitting on all that cash? What are they doing with it?
Well, we might get into that today. Actually, That's what we're really getting into today. I want to step back, though, and I want to talk about this idea of like the purpose of a not-for-profit, right? Like, what is the purpose of it? And I've actually served as vice president on a board for a not-for-profit. It was a wrestling club. It wasn't like this huge not-for-profit, but it was pretty good size. We had decent revenue coming in. And there was a purpose, a very specific purpose on why we ran this not-for-profit. It was to help train kids to win team state titles and individual state titles in wrestling, right? Okay. That was our goal. That was our focus, okay? So I want to play a hypothetical situation. We're at the state tournament. Our goal, winning state titles, okay? We bring 5 kids. All 5 of them lose every match, lose 2 matches. So we go 0 for 10 on the day. Okay. We lose every single match, okay? Our treasurer comes up to me. This is a hypothetical situation. We aren't that bad.
Okay.
This is a hypothetical situation. Our treasurer comes up to me and says, hey, Kai, right after this happens, comes up to me and says, Kai, good news. We have $100,000 in our bank account. Now I would look at this person. First of all, timing, not very good. But the $100,000 that is in our bank account means nothing. the goal of our nonprofit is to train these kids to be successful and good at something and accomplish something,
Mhm.
not so that there's $100,000 in our bank account.
Right.
Okay, let's just set that up in the context of this story, because I think we can draw some parallels to another non-for-profit, right? Not for profit in
Mm.
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. And I want to say this is the trend line for what's happening with each generation within the Mormon Church. Okay? You have different groups. You may have, boomers and Gen X and millennials. And you can see that the church is trending downward with
Yep.
each generation. Now, this may not be something that is unique to the Mormon Church. I don't know, Di. Maybe I'll ask your opinion on that. I'm sure that you keep metrics of where the church is landing with people. Is this a unique thing, or is this kind of seen across the board with churches?
I would say, the evangelical church is probably I don't know that I could answer that for the whole evangelical church, but if you break it into denominations, which I don't know how technically you wanna get, I would say our denomination is growing. So, the Assemblies of God is growing. I think Southern Baptists might be declining. Uh, yeah, I don't think we need to go too far down the road of all
Okay.
those denominations, but so
Yeah.
maybe relevancy or style kind of comes into play?
Yeah. Di, it's like you read my notes.
Okay,
Um,
good.
I would say that the Mormon church is trending downwards. I mean, I think that even
Clearly.
looking at this graphic, you can see it's trending downwards. I think what's funny from an anecdotal perspective is this was in 2016. I was still a full active believing Mormon. And I
Mm.
think that a lot of my peers were still active, fully believing Mormons in 2016, which if you, I just wonder how these numbers will actually change. I think this is the most optimistic, actually,
Mm, 'kay.
that they are. Um, so I feel that the top leadership is really out of touch with the membership, like with the people who are in the church. And
'Kay,
why I
can I ask a
Yeah,
question really
go ahead.
quick?
Yeah.
So your context is your wrestling club whose goal is to create winning wrestling team young men or whoever.
And
What
women,
is
Di, and women.
okay, I didn't wasn't sure, so I didn't say it. Okay, good note. What is the stated goal of the Mormon Church?
Yeah, I think that, and that's a really good point. You could say that it's the threefold mission of the church, right?
Okay.
Proclaim the gospel, perfect the saints, redeem the dead.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's the
And
metric by which we say they are not meeting the treasurer has come up and said, "We have the most money in the bank we've ever had," but they're not meeting the mission. Okay.
yeah, and the whole idea behind this episode is, what are really the Mormon assets? Like, what is really the asset of the Mormon church or any non-for-profit, right? Like, are the assets the actual physical, tangible assets,
Mm,
or are the assets the people that you should be serving,
yes. I'm
right?
gonna say yes to the latter.
Okay. So thank you for helping me connect my thought on that. It
Yeah.
is like, what is it? What are the assets? Like, really, what is it?
Mhm,
And I do believe that the quorum of the 15, sorry, the quorum of the 12 plus the first presidency. So we have a hierarchical group. We've kind of been talking about this throughout.
mhm,
There are 12 apostles, which kind of act as a board, and then there's a presidency that really trumps what anyone else in the church does. And so I wanted to point to the fact of, well, why are these assets, why are the people within the church, why are they not being served anymore? Like,
mm.
what is making people disconnect from that? And what is the response of the church? Okay. So that's what we're going to get into. And there is this really interesting term, PMO. Have you heard of PMO?
I sure have not.
Okay, so I'm glad that it's something you never heard of. It is called physically in and mentally out.
Mm,
People who are in the church who are physically in but mentally out. Here we have a guy, a young man, probably a millennial, sitting in a church pew on his phone while other people around him are engaged in singing. Okay.
okay.
So he is physically at church, his in body, he is at church, but he is probably mentally, checked out of that service. And so I wanted to talk about, well, why do I believe that people in the Mormon church are physically in but mentally out?
Okay.
Number one, I believe it is because of the truth claims of the church and how those have been debunked.
Right.
So we've talked about the truth claims. I believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet. I believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Jesus Christ church on the earth, right?
Disclaimer, you don't actually believe these things. You're
I
just
don't
reciting them.
I don't believe them. I've heard them enough. I can recite
Yep.
them. Okay.
Yep.
I believe that the temple will bring you closer to God than any other place on earth. Okay.
Oof.
Yeah. There you go, Di.
Mhm.
So all of those are pretty easy to refute, right? So this kind of what the church built its foundation on forever is now easy to say, well, that's not true, right?
Mm,
So they're kind of losing those people. And I think you can theologically lose people a little bit. I think you can to a point. You're going to lose people, but people will still stay if you have some engagement and a way to captivate people,
mm.
right? Like you may see that in your church. I'm sure not every single of the 2,000 people who come every single Sunday are just on fire for the Lord,
For sure.
okay? But there can be an environment that tries to bring those people in,
Yeah.
right? Would you say that that's your attempt I mean, what would you say that you try to do on a Sunday morning or throughout the week or in meeting with people? What is it that you try to do?
I mean, I think the big picture is we want people to encounter God because God is the one who will change their heart, and then all of their lifestyle choices follow where their heart is. We really can't change anybody, so we don't try. We just want to put them in an environment where they can meet God.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of where I guess I teed you up on that one. That's kind of where I thought you would go with it. And I think that why engagement is so poor in the Mormon church is because you have to look at what constitutes like a Sunday morning, right?
Yeah,
Like
what does constitute a Sunday morning? I don't even know.
you don't know. Okay, well, great.
No.
Well, this will be fun. So first you come in and there's sacrament meeting. Okay. So sacrament meeting is where the first portion you'd start with a song and a prayer, and then you would do the sacrament. So the kids would, well, we actually have a visual display on this thing. The kids would go in, and young men ages 12 to 18 and sometimes adults will come and pass the sacrament in those little cups, right? Every single Sunday you do that.
Okay.
Then they'll do kind of their announcements, right? And then they will go to like their talks. So people will prepare talks, lay people in the congregation will prepare a talk, and they will go out and give that, and then they end in a prayer and in a song. Okay. And I wanted to talk about after that, that's during sacrament meeting. Then you have Sunday school. And when I was in there, we used to have 3-hour church. Come on.
Ooh.
Then we would go to elders quorum. We're going to get to this. I love 3-hour church.
Mm.
When they went to 2-hour church, I was like, come on, you guys. What are we trying to do here? Um, I did love 3-hour church. So let's go back to sacrament meeting. Okay. In sacrament meeting, we would read out of a hymnal. Okay. The hymnal was last updated in 1985. That was the last update to the Mormon hymnal.
Hmm.
So 29 years ago, Di, I want to give you some perspective of
Okay.
1985. First of all, I was not thought of yet in 1985.
I was gonna say, well, I was alive, so I remember it.
Yeah, but there was also, you want to know what the number one song was in 1985 if we're talking about music?
Michael Jackson something.
Close.
Okay.
You got the name kind of right. George Michael's Careless
Oh.
Whisper. I'm
Oh.
never gonna dance again. Come on. So
Okay.
that was the hit jam of 1985, to give you perspective on how non-contemporary really it is. And I'm not trying to draw this battle between old hymns and new contemporary music, but I think it's safe to say that contemporary music is more engaging for the people that grew up in that era.
Yeah.
I just think that I don't know how anyone could argue that. Okay.
Music styles change for sure.
Yeah. And music style does not mean God,
No,
right? That a hymn from 1840 is not more spiritual than something that was written
absolutely.
yesterday. Okay.
Mhm.
So in 2018, they made an announcement that they were going to redo their hymnals, that they were going to
Okay.
redo everything. And they added some songs. Okay. Are you ready for
I'm
for
ready.
one of the songs that they added? Okay.
Okay.
Amazing Grace.
Oh. Whoa.
Yeah. And we could go down a rabbit trail on adding Amazing Grace, but I
Great
think
song.
it's a great song, beautiful song, not contemporary, right?
Nope.
Probably one of the oldest and most well-known hymns that you could sing. And I think it's interesting. You have this older leadership adding an old song that probably just was left out of error, not necessarily out of anything else. People could, I think, an evangelical could really go down a really a bunny trail on that one. But Amazing Grace added in 2024 to the Mormon Church. Okay,
Well done.
I think I think that says something. I also, if you look at the Mormon hymns, for those who grew up in the Mormon church, they're pretty old. I couldn't pinpoint the exact date on when most of them were added, but I would assume sometime in the mid 1800s. Okay. The last time the Mormon church saw double digit percentage growth, over 10%, was in 1853.
Whoa.
Right? So if you're saying, does contemporary music captivate people? I'll let the people at home maybe draw that conclusion. I would say yes. I would say that contemporary music and modern music and having it relate to people of the time can
Mhm.
captivate people.
Mhm. Those
And
2
so
statistics might not go, or the 2 pieces of information might not be related, but what you're suggesting is they could at least be related.
yeah, and I think you could have a correlation causation debate. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I shouldn't go down that road. But you could have that discussion and say, well, maybe there's
Yeah.
no connection at all.
It's
But
just a fair point to make.
yeah, I think it's a good point to make. The other one is I was the gospel doctrine teacher. So what that is the second group, there's Sunday school, and I used to teach all the adults. Okay. That manual was not updated from 1996 to 2019.
Hmm.
So over a 23-year period, they did not update their manual at all.
Hmm.
In 2019, they came up with a new Sunday school that's supposed to work with people teaching the gospel in their home, called Come Follow Me. But I do think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting that from like 1990 to now, the church has been on a steady decline,
Mm.
like a linear. You cannot say it's anything other than, and that includes growth seen in Africa
Mhm.
against non-growth seen in the United States. Okay. I think all of this points to someone being asleep at the wheel,
Yeah.
right? Like an organization that is probably great administratively, which I believe that the Mormon church is actually pretty darn good administratively, but lacking connection with God and
Mm,
lacking a way to take people who want to believe and putting them in an environment where they can be connected. Okay.
mhm.
So I'm going to ask you this question. Maybe we've already beat a dead horse on this thing, but does church have to be engaging? Does it have to be?
Oh, that's the end of the question?
That's question mark. Sorry, should my voice have gone up? Does church have to be engaging?
Uh, the word "have" is tricky, but I think I'm gonna go with yes, because I think an irrelevant church is not helpful in any way. I but engaging is really that's an elusive term, like, what do we mean by that? But I do think, and we have said at Venture over the years, irrelevancy is I mean, I would go so far as to say that's almost like a sin on our part of just not paying attention, or your words, being asleep at the wheel. And I think we have a responsibility as leaders to make sure that, not that we're relevant culturally or we use lots of cultural references or things like that, but just that the gospel is alive and moving in people's lives, and that should be captivating to people. How'd I do?
Something is happening here,
Oh,
Di. Can you
there
still
you
hear
are.
me?
You just froze for a second. It's all right. Carry on.
Okay, I want to consider this. God's prophets and Jesus himself were so incredibly captivating. I want you to think about Elijah and the priests of Baal. Like, you're watching this crazy display of God's power, right?
Yeah.
Pretty captivating. For those of you who don't believe in this, okay, at least the story is good, right? David slaying Goliath, right? It's a captivating story. It's
Mhm.
one that it's that underdog story. You could watch it in sports. We got it in the Bible. That's cool. The day of Pentecost. Could you imagine Jesus raising people from the dead? Like
Mm,
what that would have looked like. Like people are drawn to this,
yes.
especially in a day without TV, without, TikTok, without all of these things. People are drawn in to this. And I believe that people who proclaim the gospel have a duty, as you put
Mhm.
it,
Yep.
to be engaging, to have people be like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm interested in this. I may not be interested in the theology of it, but I think it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people with Jesus who walked with Jesus who were like, I don't know about this guy, but I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to see how it goes. And so I'm going to change gears. We're going to come back to that thought.
Okay.
This question comes up of why does the Mormon church need $265 billion? Okay. Why do they need that much?
I wanna know the answer to this too.
So there was a 60-minute special. I will put it in the show notes on the whistleblower. His last name was Nelson. Sorry, I didn't write it down in the notes. Who talked about why he worked at this place called Ensign Peak. So Ensign Peak is the church's investment arm.
Okay.
Okay. It's not directly related to the church. 32 or whatever, 20 some odd shell companies deep. It
Ooh,
is related to the church.
okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So he he said that kind of the joke around Ensign Peak was that they were saving this money for the second coming. For when Jesus comes back, they're going to have money to
To
uh,
do what? What do they need it for?
apparently Jesus is interested in US dollars, okay?
Jesus can't take care of them when he returns, so they have to be prepared to take care of themselves? It's not an
Well,
apocalypse. Okay. Are they
Yeah.
stockpiling water and ammunition also?
Food storage, food storage. So that
That was
wasn't
a
in the notes.
snarky,
Yeah,
snarky
that
thing,
was a
sorry.
snarky comment. Okay. So for the second coming, this is the thing about Jesus that is different than the Mormon church. When Jesus needed money to pay taxes, there was a way,
Mhm.
right? Found a fish, pulled the money out of its mouth, right? There was a way for them to figure out what they had to do.
Oh,
It
he even said,
wasn't
"If you follow me, you won't even have a place to lay your head." You're gonna have nothing.
yeah, and he's going to provide, right?
Yep.
God will provide. I don't want to go too theological, but I do think it's important to just show the difference between people fearlessly pursuing God, not really knowing where it's going to go, and a church that is stockpiling money
Mhm.
because of because of what? I think is
Mhm.
the question. Because of what? I believe they need that $265 billion dollars as assurance, as confidence that when the truths that they know within the church and they've known for 200 years come to light, they have a fund to rebrand themselves. That's my personal opinion.
Can you back it up?
Not yet.
Okay.
The story's not yet written. But that's my personal opinion is that they know. Can I back up the fact that they feel that they're hiding things? Yes.
Yeah.
I can back up that fact by just three examples off the top of my head. I did not write these down. Number one, Joseph Smith's seer stone was locked away in a vault and just recently came to light
Mm,
when the church was called out on it. Number two, a journal that was written about Joseph Smith's first vision was ripped out of the page was ripped out of someone's journal, hidden in a vault again until they were
mm,
called out, and they taped it back in to the
mm.
journal. You can see the tape marks on the journal.
'Kay.
Okay. That's number two. Um, those are to me very condemning things that they know their history. And yet they're choosing to say, we're not going to be upfront about our history. We're not going to tell the truth because, and I'm adding in maybe what their thoughts are. Well, it would hurt people. People would leave their relationship, aka excuse, 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 so
Yeah.
I don't have to be honest.
So people are part of the commodities, and there's lots of movie portrayals of big corporations that have gone down over the years and how they move funds around to protect those at the top, and those at the bottom, are the ones that are the commodity that's worth the loss.
Yeah, and I think that in their heart, they may be saying, hey, we're doing this to protect people.
Mm,
But I think anyone who's not telling the truth can make that same argument,
mm.
right? I could cheat on my wife and say it's better for her to not know.
Yep, good example.
I, I mean, that's people do that. They say, oh, it would hurt way too much. It's like, well, but is that the truth?
Mhm.
Is that the truth? I want to draw this really great connection. And I want, even if you are not religious, I want you to listen to this through and maybe you might have that's interesting moment. I want you to talk about this parable of the talents. So this is from Matthew 25:14. This is the only heads up I gave Di. I want her to give
Mhm.
15 seconds on the parable of the talents. So go ahead, Di.
Yeah. So a manager or master has 3 servants. He takes his wealth, he distributes it amongst the servants and says, "Take care of this while I'm gone." And when he returns, 2 of the servants have invested his wealth and provided him with, more money. They've made money on their investments. And one of them, out of fear, buries the money he's been entrusted with and is called a wicked and lazy servant. And his money is taken from him and given to the two that actually invested it well.
Okay. So I wanted to create this really interesting parallel. The and we're going to go on in verse 24. This is the Lord's condemnation to the person who received one talent.
Okay, and I
The-
didn't say that the talent is just a term of money measurement, and the first two servants who invest well are given more talents, and the one who hides his is only given one, and he hides the one.
Yep, exactly. So this man who received one talent had something to say back to his master. It says, "Master, I know that you are a harsh man, reaping where you haven't sowed, gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid."
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I was afraid and went off and hid, you could say hoard, your money in the ground. See, you have what is yours. So here he is giving it back, right? You have what is yours. And his master replied, "You evil." And I'm reading from the CSB. But if you are a King James Version person, which if you grew up in the church like me, King James Version would say, "You are a slothful servant."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that might come up if you're looking at the slides. You got the cheat sheet on this one. "You are a slothful servant. If you knew that I reap where I haven't sowed and gathered where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and I would have received my money back with interest when I returned." The Lord is talking about the lowest denominator,
Mm-hmm.
right? Investing it in with the bank, right? In my opinion. So he took the talent from him and gave it to the one who had 10 talents. For everyone who has more will be given, and he that has more and he will have more than enough. But from those who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. Even what he has will be taken from him and and thrown this is good for nothing servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and can I read? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay. Wow. So there is a lot to unpack. We're going to talk about the five that got added five. Okay.
Okay.
Later. But for now, there are some really interesting things that happen in this. This idea of being a slothful servant, Joseph Smith actually talked about it in D&C 58:26. He said, "For behold, it is not meet that I should command in all things, for he that is commanded in all things is a slothful and unwise servant."
Mm.
Right? There was a conference talk where they actually showed a sloth on the screen, and they talked about what it meant to be a slothful and unwise servant.
Okay.
So I just think that that's interesting. Like, if you hear that term slothful, which is not thrown around in the Bible very much,
Mhm.
and then you have this interesting, I think sometimes when I read the Bible, I think, what is this pointing to? And maybe we can find out what this is pointing to. The person with one talent was told, "Hey, you could have done something. There is this minimum standard that you could have done to try to double this, and you chose not to. You chose not to invest back in the assets and have those produce something."
Right.
Right? So there's this minimum level of investing. And then I'm going to skip the next reference, 28 through 29, but in verse 30 it says that that servant who had one talent is cast into outer darkness.
Mm.
Outer darkness is something significant
Mhm.
in the Mormon church.
Oh.
Very significant. There is theology that says that I will be in outer darkness, that I will be low, that I won't even be resurrected. I have left the church. I am an apostate, and I will be thrown into outer darkness. Okay. It's very interesting language.
Mm.
You have all of these I consider them to be winks from God.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, those of you who aren't spiritual, you might say, oh, okay, you're going kind of out on a limb. But I think that there are so many interesting connections to the end of this parable and the Mormon church.
Mhm.
I mean, Di, do you see that at all? Or is it maybe me just being hyper spiritual at this
No,
point?
for sure. I think that's what makes something palatable or believable is that it does have truth in it somewhere, or the language has, a connection of truth somewhere, but it's just taken in a different direction.
Yeah. And so I look at this one talent, and really, I view ex Mormons all over the world as that one talent that I don't believe were developed and given the tools for longevity and connection with God. I think that we look at our leadership and we say, why didn't they just tell the truth from the beginning?
Mm,
Like, we have a song in the church that is that is do what is right and let the consequences follow. Right? This is a very common hymn that we would sing. Do what is right and let the consequences follow. When the church finds problematic things in church history, that's what they should do. They
mm,
should have done what is right, changed their theology. Maybe that takes some humility. Maybe that takes some things that they don't want to do, but they should do that, continue to invest as opposed to leveraging the truth claims of the church and shaming and guilting people into staying.
yeah.
That's where I feel that the rebuke in this scripture is directly at the Mormon church.
Mm,
Because the second you know that things are wrong, the second you know you're deceiving people, you change course right there. If
mhm,
you are truly worried and concerned about the assets of the church, the assets being the people, you change course as soon as you realize we are misleading people.
mhm.
We are telling a story that does not align with what we initially thought, and we are changing course. Anyways, so I look at that one single talent. I look at what's there, and I don't think that that talent is lost. I
Mm,
really don't. I think that that one talent should go, just as Jesus said, to somewhere that can develop it,
yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
that can grow it, and
Yeah.
somewhere that can help people feel connection.
Yeah. Yep, I think there are probably more than one application of this, but I think you're spot on in, yep, you gotta reinvest, I guess if we use the language here, reinvest that talent in a place where profits or interest is being earned already. Does that fit?
Yeah, yeah, and I think to really bring that in, where the theology of Jesus, the theology of healing, the theology of forgiveness, all of those things, like
Truth.
truth, yeah, truth. No, that's a big one. Where all of those things can grow, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's the connection that we should make in these verses, right?
Well, and I think there's also an obvious one, which is where I thought you were going with this, and maybe that's kind of embedded in there, which is if the goal of an organization, a not-for-profit organization, am I stealing your thunder? I hope I'm
No,
not.
no, you're not. Go ahead.
Uh, is just stockpiling funds that is not going to be applauded by the master or the Lord. That is those assets, as your language is, are to be used to earn a return on the investment. So they're to be spent, they're to be invested, they're to be taken out of just hoarding or burying, I guess, using that language. So, yeah, that's where we go back to the question of why does the Mormon church, as an organization, why are they sitting on so much? And maybe they can point to this and say, well, we're earning interest on it. And that's maybe too literal of a take on that.
Yeah, and you could say that. You could say, "Hey, they are," but I don't believe that it is about empire. We've talked about this in the in the episodes. It's not about saying, "Hey, we have this amazing empire that's growing. We have temples going up. See the temples? See the temples?" Guess what? No one's going to them.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? To me, that is not the mission of the church. The mission of the church should be people.
Mhm.
People are the most important thing. If
Yep.
we are losing a whole generation of people and we're saying, let's just skip them. Maybe we'll soft fund some YouTube channels that can try to bring those people back. Maybe we can do all these things. Why don't you change your theology? Why isn't it just, hey, we're going to be honest, we're going to be straightforward, and we need to make some changes, and we need to repent and change as an
Mm.
organization and as a
Mm.
church. So anyways, I believe that go ahead, Di. It seemed like you
I
had a comment.
just yeah, the unfortunate thing, or probably fortunate, is the Mormon church just can't hide things anymore because the world has access to information. So, where secrecy and only the privileged few could know the truth maybe used to work, that just doesn't work anymore. So, it's a model. Let's keep these things under wraps. That model will bring the whole thing down. It can't work.
Yeah, and is that biblical?
Well, of course not, but
No, our sin will be shouted from the rooftops.
absolutely.
Okay. So I think of a cell tower. I mean, maybe whoever was putting that together might have said, and sorry, I shouldn't go too biblical today. I don't want to miss our audience, but it is being shouted from the rooftops. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't say people know that the church is hoarding $265 billion. People know that. The church would love to conceal that. The church would love to say, "Oh no, we aren't. We're just this down home church just down the street where you can come clean the building." I think that that's the projection, but at the same time they are hoarding, and I believe that they are being a slothful servant. I
Mhm.
believe they have a responsibility of honesty, investing back in the local church
Yeah.
and doing all those things. That's what I believe. Anyways, this has been maybe one of those topics that is interesting. It's been interesting for me to delve into it, to have the theology and then also what's really happening in the Mormon church, and to try to see if those meet anywhere, to try to see if there is any connection at all. Di, I appreciate you hanging with me on this one.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I think if we make a closing comment here, I like that you said, "I don't wanna miss our audience." I do think, if a large amount of our audience, which I think this is true, are ex-Mormons who are just ex-Mormons, who haven't made a commitment to be a part of a different church. I think we just stating the obvious is just so obvious. What does a not-for-profit organization that calls itself a church with which I think has an embedded message there of we care about people, what are they doing sitting on billions of dollars? Who is profiting from that? Because certainly somebody is profiting. And again, our audience agrees with us probably in mostly because they are mostly people who have already left the Mormon church. But that is not how the majority of not for profits handle funds.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Di. And so I think we're gonna land the plane on this one. I'll use my
Yeah,
corporate talk.
if you
Yeah.
have questions, we invite you to email us at jesusformormons@gmail.com. We will probably in a future episode start tackling questions. We're working on that right now. In the meantime, we're grateful for your support and that you share this with those that you think will be interested and benefit from it. And again, we'd love your reviews and subscriptions on your podcasting app.
All right. Thanks, Di. Well, until next time.
Yep. We'll see you soon.